My family used to go on vacation to my grandma's lake house in the summer. It always started out as my favorite time of the year since it was so far from the city. This meant I could see the stars at night or hear the sounds of nature rather than the hissing of vehicles burning fuel. It was so much fun. The stuff childhoods were made of. The only thing I didn't like was Grandma. She was pleasant enough when around my parents or siblings, but when it was just us two, she was weird. Especially when we were next to the lake. There is a monster in the dark. My grandma would whisper only to me. It pulls its prey into the abyss to feed. I would deliberately laugh at her comments, because I felt like she wanted to scare me on purpose. I'd say that she was crazy, then go and do something else. But, as the vacation continued, as her comments ate away at me, I'd slowly grow more and more terrified of the still water. I was always relieved when we left Grandma's and made our way home. Grandma died when I was 17 years old. And that summer my family planned to go for another vacation to help clear out the last of her belongings. The property had been left to my mother, and she wanted to redecorate, but I didn't fancy going. Maybe it was because I felt I was too old for family holidays. Or maybe, and more realistically, it was because of the bad memories. Either way, I just decided to stay back. Everyone understood and agreed that I'd come with them next year before I went off to college. And with hugs and goodbyes, they drove off, and I was left with the house to myself for a few weeks. Junk food, video games, occasional hangouts with friends. It was going to be a dream come true. The sensation of being home alone didn't hit me until that night. I was relaxing on the sofa, flicking through channels and trying to not fall asleep before finally giving up. I figured it was time for bed. Turning the television off, I was suddenly met with how quiet the house was. How still and empty it really was. My heart began to pump faster as my imagination suddenly activated. Childhood fears that my rational mind knew were bogus suddenly felt alive. Images began to flow through my mind of people standing behind doorways, of creatures under the bed, and then through my terror. As I moved to step off the sofa towards the light switch, my grandma's voice entered my mind. There is a monster in the dark. My grandma would whisper only to me. It pulls its prey into the abyss to feed. And as my foot touched the carpeted floor, I screamed as something in the dark grabbed my ankle. Grandma never said the monster was in the water. Please, please, I beg of you, have mercy. As part of the game, I deliberately paused and faced my boss. He watched on at the squirming man beneath my grip, pretending to consider his pleas. The pause allowed them to believe, to hope, before it was all taken away. It was my favorite part. I even prolonged it with a gentle whisper of, "Boss." And finally, he said with a cold brutality, "Do it," and I obliged, bringing the blade down in a quick slam that separated the man's hand from his arm at the wrist. The now stump exploded instantly, squirting blood like a fountain, as my boss's former business partner screamed in terror and pain before collapsing and writhing. The message had been sent and my part done, so I walked away. Amputation as a form of punishment was outlawed 20 years ago, and though many were punished for what was considered a barbaric act, due to my connections and the fact that my identity was unknown, I was never cut and certainly never punished. Just to remember the good times, I sometimes watched the documentaries of those who had survived amputation punishment. Those who wept as they discussed a life without a limb or two, and the monsters who had held them down as something was taken away from them forever. I cried also, but only because I missed it so much. Sometimes, whilst amongst family, my mind would wander as I recalled the good times. I even tried to replicate the feeling as much as possible, but it was never the same. Nothing could compare to the feeling of the initial separation of skin. The feel of a thick bone, normally so tough, separating like warm butter. The sound of the screams that didn't haunt me, but soothed me. It was in the middle of the night that my bedsheets were removed. I groaned, cursing at my wife, only to realize with sudden fear that she wasn't by my side. She'd gone to her sister's for the week. I was home alone. I bolted up, figuring it was some of my victims out for revenge. But with a slam, I was forced downwards and onto my back. Adrenaline flooded through me, and I protested loudly, but it was strange. I was being held down on every inch of my body, but I couldn't see anyone. I demanded to know who they were, for them to show themselves rather than hiding in the dark, but nobody replied nor came to view. Until the large meat cleaver, one I recognized instantly from my glory days, appeared to float into the room. Panic filled me, for I understood, but that wasn't enough. They wanted me to know. And as the light switch was flicked twice, it revealed the truth for a half second, as my pained eyes adjusted to the sudden illumination. Thousands of severed hands, their fingers wiggling, held me perfectly still as the blade was brought down on my neck. I bought what appeared to be one of the most delicious, ripe watermelons I'd ever seen, from a roadside stand somewhere between San Jose and Monterey. I don't frequently stop at such places, but they just look so irresistible. The price was great too, and much better than the local supermarket. The sellers were an older Latino couple who appeared to be down on their luck. I can't say I didn't feel a bit bad for them, and that might have contributed to my stopping. Besides, they had a whole truckload of them and didn't seem to be getting much business. Anyway, I got the watermelon and headed home, where I promptly dumped it on the counter. One thing led to another, and life got busy. I was eating out quite a lot, and frankly, I forgot about it. Then, maybe a couple of weeks or so after I'd picked it up, I saw a small, clear puddle of fluid collecting on the counter just beside the melon. Oh, crap. I bet it's rotting, I'd thought, disappointed. What a waste. I wasn't thinking clearly. If I had been, I wouldn't have picked it up. But that's what I did. The melon instantly exploded downward, birthing its entire load of foul-smelling innards and completely covering my counter, along with half the kitchen floor. The insides consisted of way too much clear liquid and pink, flesh-like chunks that smelled like rotten death. Then there was the thing. The iridescent, beetle-like body was nearly the size of a human newborn. Its face most closely resembled one, but only if said baby had been starved, beaten, stretched, twisted, and sprayed with acid. The creature lay on its armored back, making this ear-splitting mewling and sucking noise, rocking side to side, and intently watching me with two black and lidless eyes. It had a number of barb-covered, roach-like legs that groped at the air above it, repeatedly extending and retracting. Although its existence was offensive to me, I couldn't stop staring at it, the taste of vomit fresh in my mouth. I needed to kill it. I felt this urge deep in my bones. It needed to die, or else humanity would pay the price. I removed a long, serrated knife from the knife block, watching as the thing's mandibles worked back and forth rapidly to generate that god-awful noise. But when I was just about to plunge the blade between its wriggling, clicking legs, it suddenly flipped over, and I don't clearly remember what happened next. As I recall, there was a lot of running, screaming, and pain. Those prickly legs were crawling over my skin at some point, but it's honestly all a bit hazy. It's probably for the best. One thing I can't figure out: how did it get inside of me? Too late now, I guess. Nothing to do but look after my own precious little melons. I've already passed 3, but I feel like I'm going to have so many more.
Please subscribe, or the toxic skull will come for you.